What's up, everybody? My name is Mike Whitmire, co-founder, CEO of FloQast, inactive CPA. Welcome to Blood, Sweat, and Balance Sheets, the podcast where accountants interview entrepreneurs, executives, CFOs from a variety of functions. Our goal is to help with career advice here, business development, and just helping accountants launch their careers. So our guest for today is Gary Klintworth, former founder and managing director of ARC Consulting, but recently acquired. Congratulations on that, Gary. Mind introducing yourself to the audience a little bit?
Yeah, so Gary Klintworth, I started my career off at Arthur Andersen. I think everybody kind of knows what happened there. I transitioned out to Grant Thornton because I had a passion for helping sort of middle market, high growth software SaaS technology companies. And so went to Grant Thornton for a couple of years and then went into industry.
Were you Bay Area Arthur Andersen as well?
I was in the Oakland enterprise office for a little bit, and then moved over to San Francisco when we were consolidated with the group there.
And then Grant Thornton, you remained in the Bay Area for.
Yeah, was it Grant Thornton? I actually transferred over to their consulting practice because it was during when SOX was happening, and I thought it was a faster track to partner. I quickly kind of figured out that I wasn't cut out for Sarbanes-Oxley sort of controls and all of that other good compliance stuff. And I really loved the aspect of being able to be a CPA and part of the accounting side and even the audit side. But really what made me excited is figuring out what makes companies succeed and fail and kind of the paths that they take during that process, not only in the financial side, but also on the business side. And then 15 years ago, I thought there was a great opportunity for me to sit in between the audit team and the client for bandwidth and technical expertise in the accounting and finance world, as well as systems. And we started our practice and away we went. We've grown it to about 35 people. And recently we were just acquired by CBiz. And it's going to be a good thing for us in terms of gaining depth and breadth for sure.
Yeah, and for some context for the audience, Gary and ARC Consulting have been working with us in FloQast for a couple of years at this point. And awesome firm up in the Bay. I mean, Gary's being really humble. They've served. You look at almost any IPO coming out of Silicon Valley, they've helped with it. It's some serious. You want to just show off a little bit with some of the names you've been helping out with to get a little more credibility for the audience, even.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of started back when, we started with LinkedIn, and LinkedIn was our first IPO. I mean, those guys were, believe it or not, on QuickBooks at the time.
Wow.
They were and they went public on QuickBooks. Hopefully Kent Buller doesn't get upset with me saying that, but and Sardello. But yeah, they went public on QuickBooks. They quickly transitioned to Oracle. That was the one that first put us on the map. Then we did Yelp. Then we did Pandora Media. Then Workday. Then Slack. Asana was one of our more recent ones, as well as Sumo Logic. We've actually done about 55 IPOs in the last maybe 6 years. And, everyone always thinks it's super sexy. You're down in the trenches. You're really digging in and helping the client and being sort of extra bandwidth and expertise for them and kind of helping them through the process. So it's been a lot of fun, but a lot of work, that's for sure.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic. Maybe we can stay on pre-IPO work for a little because Sure. Auditors, I know I was this way when I left EY. I was like, I'm going to industry. I'm going to work way less than I did before. And I worked a lot at EY. It was no joke. And then I got to Cornerstone pre-IPO and worked more than I ever worked in audit. So yeah, let's talk about what are some of the challenges you're dealing with as you're getting ready to go through that. Like the reality behind hours that go into it. Would love to hear your take, having gone through so many of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was in industry for a little while as well, right? And I thought the same thing. I'd go from public into industry and work less, and I was working more. I was at a public company that was a new public company, and it's still a challenge even post-IPO, right? Like pre-IPO, it's hard to get there. But then post-IPO, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yep.
And not everybody gets to the stage of a public company like in their pre-IPO phase. Like they go public and they still have work to do, right? Hires, building out infrastructure, integrations, being more efficient and effective. But yeah, I mean, I in terms of just the whole pre-IPO process, it basically touches every organization, right? So it touches IT, it touches the finance department, it touches the accounting department, and being able to kind of pull that all together and kind of help the companies get to where they need to be, in addition to some of the, just some of the general compliance and controls and everything else that need to happen. But there's always a heavy lift, right? I mean, the reality is, you and I both know that, companies that are pre-IPO, kind of their monthly and quarterly closes they're kind of good stopping points, right? Now they're not hard closes. And so there's typically a big heavy lift in order to get to the point where they're having a cadence where they can, close the books, do 10Qs, earnings releases. And the more in advance that they can actually get into a good cadence on doing that, and having the tools in place like FloQast and everything else, or, Workiva, some of the other things that we see that are common tech stacks, or where people are really excelling in terms of getting a leg up and being able to hold each other accountable for being where they want to be, so that they don't slip up on something that's post IPO.
Yeah, and I helped take the company public 10 years ago, so a lot's changed over time. But we had just transitioned to NetSuite from QuickBooks. It was like 6 months before. We had not drafted a risk and control matrix. We were figuring no mock earnings calls, nothing like that. We weren't on a really great cadence until I would say 6 months before we went public. And then you're adding people, you're drafting an S1, you're getting all this stuff going. So like when you look at companies now, I'm curious the time frame when about X number of quarters ahead of an IPO, when should they be closing on a regular cadence? When should they be doing mock earnings calls? Sure. Like, do you recommend doing mock 10Qs as well?
Well, I mean, I think having a 10Q shell is always good, but quite frankly, like when you're drafting your registration statement, there's a derivative that comes out of that helps you with your 10Q. But I always tell people that, to the extent that they can, and sometimes they can't, right? Because the board directive happens and they just put their foot on the gas pedal, depending on the timeline. But, I'd say once you're executing on your business model, at least 12 months in advance, you want to start thinking about like having at least, maybe 2 quarters worth of really solid closes every month for like 6 months. And then maybe you even want to start doing some kind of, I don't know, necessarily mock earnings calls. I mean, I think that, the CFOs may want to do that, and it's probably a good practice. Maybe at least a few, maybe a quarter in advance of actually filing. But then you have 3 to 4 more months or whatever of the comment process, and you have a little bit of time in between to go ahead and shore that up. Most people don't even hire an SEC person, to be honest, until they're public, and quite frankly, like we supplement a lot of that, where we usually hang around with our clients that we take public for at least 2 quarters afterwards. And they hire somebody and we teach them how to fish in terms of, getting them in a good cadence in terms of what the reporting looks like, and transitioning that fully over to them, because I don't know that you really need somebody full-time in advance of actually being a public company, even though it might help. And
so are you literally helping draft the S1?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we're drafting not necessarily the business sections, right? I mean,
right.
But anything that relates to the financials, MD&A, everything else. But it's mostly the biggest time and the heavy lift, to be honest, in the process that we're going through, is preparing for the audit team to come in and do their SAS 100 quarterly reviews. The quarterly reviews, getting in a cadence of like them being able to close the stub periods or the year ends and get an audit done, because a lot of times, their previous years, they did the audit in May for a December year end, or it kind of slipped a little bit here and there. But being able to do that and really rigorously close, so we kind of augment their staffing as well as the technical side and coordinating with the audit team. Because quite frankly, like the team has their day job, right? Like they're still closing the books for January when, we're working on, in February and March when we're getting stuff ready for December, like in the filing. So it's a lag. Yeah.
And then there's I don't know if this is common, but we definitely went through it. It was a 3-year retrospective audit because we didn't have a lot of things hammered out. And so, you're working on your day job, right? I'm working in 2010. And then they're like, hey, what's up with this contract from 2007? And I'm like, I don't know. I wasn't here. I didn't work here as an employee. Let me go dig it up, I suppose. Literally open the
I gotta tell you, you nailed it like before when we were talking one time and you said, try to nail down your key metrics as early as possible, because I'll tell you what, like if those don't trend in the right direction, that could stop you from, you got to figure out what those metrics are, what they mean in advance. That's the thing that I'd say, especially on the top line, right? And you got to be able to know what those things are, because it's not a marketing document, but it's a marketing document. Let's be honest, right? Like at the end of
Yeah.
the day, if you've got to explain something in S1 filing where your revenue dropped and why, and why the key metrics aren't trending in the right direction, or they're not increasing, or your retention's going down, you got to make sure that those are the right things, that those are right metrics, and they actually tell the story, right?
Yeah, it's the nuances in it are unbelievable. And it's always good to have like your target goal. Here's what I want my metrics to look like when we go public, and then hopefully rally the company around getting that done and not having to, spin some story around why something went south or you didn't execute as well as you could have. But yeah, for those listening who haven't seen an S1, I mean, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong here, but my take is it's kind of like the biggest pitch deck the company's ever prepared is sort of the first half, and then it's financials after that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is. It's a huge pitch deck, right? And it's all, you've got some fancy graphics in there, but quite frankly, it's a lot about market as well, right? So it's like all about like the industry you're in, and what's the market for that, and how much you're going to capture. And quite frankly, there's got to be a story you can tell. Usually a lot of my clients, what they do is, they've nailed it domestically, and like their pitch is that they're going to expand international and they're going to be able to have exponential growth, or they've got some channels that they're going through. They've got new product releases, or features and functionality, and the thing is a lot of the companies that we're working with, this as well as I do, is that the stickiness of your product is huge nowadays, right? Like if you can say that you have a retention rate that's high, the reality is that the growth can be exponential, and that's what people are kind of looking for, right?
Yeah.
In the marketplace, especially in the technology industry. Biotech and pharma, very different. There's a little bit more bet involved there, right?
Yeah, for
in
sure.
the stage of the trials and everything else. But for the most part, software SaaS, even some of the hardware and security companies, it's similar to what we're talking about right now.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. So now I want to go back to your consulting days, your audit days. And one of the things that I think or let me take a step back. A lot of auditors want to become partner at their firm. Like that's kind of a goal. And I think oftentimes there's this, thought that, hey, if I'm really good at doing audit, I'm going to become a partner. My take on that is that's not how it works. You should be good at business development to really get into that area. So it sounds like you sort of naturally fell into some of that. Do you have any advice for the audience on, like, while you're auditing, steps you could take to try to develop a little business for your firm and try to prove yourself out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to the market here in the Bay Area and probably in California in general, but I think it's true throughout. It's all about relationships, right? It's all about building those relationships with folks and having them trust you as a trusted business advisor, not just like somebody who's coming in and ticking and bashing. Being able to take best practices from one client and take them to the next client, right? Like, I mean, that's where you're really going to add the value. Where as an auditor, I always tell people this when I'm trying to hire people, because we actually try to hire people that would go otherwise to the Big Four.
Yeah.
The biggest difference, well, there's a couple of differences. One, especially at the partner level, but is that our clients want us there because we're adding value on the consulting side. They really want us there. On the audit side, they typically want them in and out as quick as possible, right? But if you can actually develop that edge where your clients like working with you because you are bringing some value to the table, because there's something you learned in another client that these guys should be implementing to make sure they're more efficient and effective, that's where they're going to get a leg up. On the partner track side, I wanted to be on the partner track. I quickly figured out that I didn't really want to sign anything but engagement letters. And so, just from a risk perspective, kind of always looking over your shoulder. But in terms of getting to that level and on that track, there's two ways to do it, I think, nowadays, to be honest, just because of all the compliance out there. One is to be just overly technical.
Right.
And you can sit on the national office side at some point. Or you're on some risk management. But the other way is like realistically having a good mix and taking from everybody that you find their management style and making it your own, and getting to the point where if somebody's really good at business development, try to see if you can get on proposal calls with them and just kind of force your way into really learning what people are doing that makes them successful. And then taking that as your own and developing your career from there.
Yeah. So I think what you said is a seemingly small sentence, but really important. Like, ask to be on some of those business proposal calls. You really do need to ask. That's not going to be put in your lap. You got to go and be proactive about it. And then just practically, I think accountants think about networking as like going to a happy hour, meeting people, doing all these kind of weird things. Like it's not like that. For example, you can be a senior auditor and you're trying to build your career. So at all your clients, like make friends with the accounting managers, have people just like you as an auditor. Like there's not, the bar's pretty low. A lot of people don't like their auditors. So if you are the one that they actually like, they're going to remember you and they're going to be a controller one day. You're going to be higher up. Maybe they'll call you up to come in and do the audit pitch. And all of a sudden you're, kind of presenting stuff from there. So it can happen naturally. It doesn't have to be forced. Just try to have them like you. And then stay in touch, right?
Yeah, I have never subscribed and I've never even done it. I attend very few. We've built a really big business. And it's never been, I've never gone to networking events. It's always been like, and don't be afraid to ask, right? Like if you have a client that really likes you, like literally go ask them, say, hey, can you introduce me to 3 of your other controller friends or something? Or like, if you hear any opportunities, don't be afraid to ask. It's like going out and raising money, right? It's like, don't be afraid to ask for it because, if you're really good at what you do, then people are going to want to refer you in and then they look good as well. Right.
And the worst thing that can happen is they say no and you move on with your life.
Yeah. And you probably won't hear, if you're really good at what you do, you probably won't hear that very often.
Yeah, I think if you're comfortable enough and have the guts to ask, you're probably not going to get a no in that one. So really,
exactly.
Yeah, so you got to put yourself out there as an auditor to try to get that business development because that's how you catch the attention of other partners. Like this sucks, but the average partner isn't going to go to another partner and be like, "Hey, Mike put together a really amazing work paper. Like it's the best documentation I've ever seen." They're going to be like, "Hey, that Mike guy brought a lead to me and we ended up closing him. That's pretty amazing. That's what actually matters."
Yeah. Or, the client came and said, thank you for having Joe on my audit team because like, it was just a joy or a pleasure, like having them. And then, that those are the types of people that can develop the relationships that will end up in, good business development. So, it's all around like just making sure that you're being that partner, right? Collaborative. And then also keeping them out of trouble. I mean, that's the idea of an auditor, right? Like that's what it should be collaborative with the client and then also keeping them out of trouble, like making sure that they stay that line, right?
Yeah, and you got to be reasonable, and try to be the likable auditor, which is tricky given that relationship, but you can pull it off for sure. And I want to circle back to one of your comments. You said, I've never gone to a networking event. Like to really explain the power of referrals and relationships, I'm going to take it beyond that. You've never spent $1 on sales and marketing at all. It's you and Jim are known. You guys are getting clients, and it just happens because of how good you are and how much people like you.
Yeah, we've never done any marketing. I'm actually sometimes, I get nervous about doing marketing because we're so busy and we're trying to hire people like crazy, which is great, right? Being busy is great, but it is you got to find your channels too, right? Like, so we learned early on that it wasn't the venture capital firms that we were going to be serving their portfolio companies. We learned that in week 1 that I went out on my own, right? I started meeting with them and I figured out, there's these channels like, who are you going to add value for, right? Like, and for us, it was the audit teams. They wanted us to be in there because that we helped their realization go up and their risk go down, and we helped the client. And so we're kind of sitting as a middleman. But if you're identifying those types of opportunities, the networking events, it's not that I haven't gone to any of them. It's just that, it's not really the way that I think that we like to develop business. I mean, we do a good job for our clients and then our name gets out there. And I think that that's a good thing for people to live by that are trying to build their career as well. Like you do a good job, even if it's a CFO, you do a great job by them, they're going to take you to the next big thing that they go to, right? Like that's just how it works within industry. That's how it works within, consulting. That's how it works within, bigger firms. And, they're going to take you, if they like you and you do a great job for a partner and you're a senior manager or a senior, they're going to take you under their wing and they're going to take you to the next big projects that's going to put you on the map for whatever the promotion is that you need to get. And if you continue to do a good job for people, I mean, it's going to kind of speak for itself, right?
Yeah, no, it's spot on. That's all right. Now I'd love to cover your transition out of accounting into, entrepreneurship, managing, leading, all of that. So what are some of the biggest adjustments you've had to make along the way? Any advice for skill sets that accountants should be focused on developing to move into more of a higher level position?
Yeah, I mean, when I went on my own, I've just found a niche need. There just wasn't really anybody who was kind of taking on this role to sit in between the audit team and and it was a unique situation that I didn't really seek out, but I saw it, right? So I'd say early on, as much as you can, start looking out for, don't have your head down in the work papers. Like, start thinking about, like, gosh, what am my clients struggling with? I'm sure you think the same thing, right? You saw your clients struggling with all the things that now you're solving for, right? And like,
Yeah.
it wasn't something that was probably at the time, super sexy and like, oh gosh, this is something that I'm going to develop this software that's like Oracle, but it's like, there's a need, there's a niche, we need to fill it. And and I saw the need, and I went out, and I would say that, like, the need's the first thing. The second thing is going to be figuring out the channels, because when you first start off on your own, you're trying to be an entrepreneur, you're trying to do something, you've got to have those advocates. They're going to help propel you to the next level, right? You've got to figure out who those people are going to be. And like I said, I figured out it was the audit partners and the audit firms that would refer us into work, figure out what those channels are to kind of build it. And then from, I've always subscribed to do the right thing all the time, no matter what. I know that my only asset for my business is human capital. And if you don't treat them right, and you don't do the right thing all the time, no matter what, by them and your clients, and be responsive, like, it's not going to go anywhere. You're going to be sort of a second tier, third tier, fourth tier, within a space. So you gotta really do that. And I know that you guys do that for your people. Everyone loves working there at FloQast, and I've heard nothing but good things. And it comes from the tone at the top down, right? And like, you and I, as leading businesses, if we're not, shame on us if we're not like promoting that, right?
Totally. And I forget, this is all backed by numbers as well. I forget the exact number, but you guys have amazing employee retention, and average tenure at ARC is really long. Like, you've done a killer job on that front. It's how you maintain culture. Just, it's so key.
It is, and it's we call it the ARC family, and it's for a reason, right? Like, it's because we kind of treat everyone as family members, and we get excited about closing deals together, and we get excited about doing good work together. We get excited about the press releases for companies that we've taken public, right? I mean, we kind of do that all together, and we celebrate it, and it's a really great thing. I mean, we've had probably 5 people leave. 2 of them came back, and then a couple of them went to be like really successful pre-IPO companies, where if they didn't go, I probably would have gone, because they made a ton of money. And I'm happy for them, and I'm proud of them. And it's been really good retention, but you got to do the right thing. Like, you just have to do the right thing for the people when you have human capital like that. That's so important and critical for success.
Yeah. Pro tip: joining a place about 18 months ahead of an IPO is a low risk way to make a good amount of money. That's that's the kind of spot you want to find out, I'm realizing.
Agreed. Yeah. Maybe negotiate an acceleration clause in your options in case they get acquired, though.
That happens all the time as well. Oh, man. That'd be the most bittersweet day of my life if that happened on IPO date. But hopefully that becomes a problem. So, all right, trends in accounting. Like, if you're thinking out towards what's necessary to be successful as a CFO or a CAO or accountant, what do you think? What are you seeing is becoming more and more important, and what do you think is the skill sets we'll need in the future?
Well, some of the things that I always see is, like, if you're going to be a core accountant for your tenure, if that's what you want to do, if you want to be a controller, if you don't want to progress past that level, then I think that just becoming really good at what you do, like being able to actually put together a team, right? Like, and that's so important at that controller level. If you don't have a team that you've put together to surround yourself with, you can't do any of the other things that really are value add that you really want to do. I mean, you're really digging in the details. So if you want to be an accountant for life, a controller, make sure you can build a team and take a team with you wherever you go that you can rely on. If you're wanting to get to the CFO level, what I found out that the biggest issue is that some folks go down the accounting route and they never get that exposure to finance. Like, and everyone thinks accounting, finance, they're the same thing. They're not, right?
They're totally different.
Yeah. They're totally different. And if you want to be a CFO, like, you have to at some point figure out even if you step down a level, get into a finance role and learn the finance side of the house before you have sort of a complete package where you can become a CFO somewhere, because almost inevitably it's a requirement. Like, people say, well, you don't have any finance experience, you're just an accountant, you're going to stay at the controller level. But if you really want to accelerate that growth, you have to be in a finance role, or the other way is like, you're really good at raising money and somebody hires you as their CFO, right? Like, you're straight out of banking and they need to raise money, but that's least likely, and sometimes not even as successful as a CFO. A lot of times it's kind of coming up through the accounting ranks, transitioning to finance, getting that background, and then really digging in and getting a first CFO gig.
Yeah, I mean, that's my take on the best route. Accounting, learn the numbers, you're backward looking, you see how the business operates. And then it is like, you have to do finance, or else the CEO is going to be looking at you and be like, oh, you've only looked in the past. Accounting is looking at the past. We're here to think about the future as executives.
Yep.
And super important. Let's talk about like training your people and mentoring them. So when you're working with your team, like, what are some of the things you try to coach them on from a client relationship perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we've always been successful just because we're super responsive, almost to a fault at sometimes, right? Like, I always teach my people, like, if there's a lead that comes in, don't wait, like, respond immediately, even if it's like, hey, I'll get back to you in 2 days, right? Like, be responsive. And in terms of mentoring our folks, like, we have several levels of mentors for our folks, and it's kind of similar to an accounting or an audit firm, or in terms of our levels of folks. But when I'm trying to get somebody, I mean, it's like, become a technical expert to a certain extent, but don't let that kind of lead the way, right? Like, you have to be able to come in and look at stuff from a higher level. Don't get into the weeds. Step out of the weeds every now and again, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're in the weeds, like, the reality is that you're not acting like the next level, right? You're, as a staff, you're not acting as a senior, you're not acting as a manager, not a senior manager, if you're not stepping back and holistically thinking about things. So I try to mentor them to make sure that that's the case. And then having their own techniques to, like, actually figure out immediately, like, is something right, before digging into the details, right? Like, does this make sense? Like, do I need to spend 17 hours on this, if, quite frankly, like, I look at it from a high level and step back and it doesn't even make any sense, and I've got to ask some good questions before I waste time on it. And those are the types of things I try to mentor seniors and maybe even managers on, but by the time they get to manager level, they should really know that.
That's such an interesting point. Like, there's data, and you can oftentimes just hop into an analysis. Let's start digging into it and figure out what's going on. But if you actually pick your head up and think about the story of what's going on, you can save a lot of time and actually get to the right. Oh man, you're reminding me of, I hate to say this, I'm just going to admit on the podcast, we had a quarter where our net promoter score of our product went down, and that never happens for us. Like, people love our product and everything, and we started freaking out, and like, we had some executives who wanted to launch this big study. Let's figure it out. Let's dig into it, all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, guys, we just launched a new product. That's super simple. We're getting a ton of feedback. Like, people are, it needs to do XYZ things. So we're getting dinged on a couple scores, and net promoter score is really punitive. If you have one bad number, it like really drives you down. And so, my take was like, we don't need to dig in. We don't need to put a ton of hours into studying this. Like, I'm confident it's going to go back up as we build out features. And sure enough, like, that's exactly what happened. We had 5 people get back to us, dinged us on our new product. Everyone else loved the core application, and we were good. And like, yeah, you got to know the story of the business and the market to save yourself a ton of time. That's a really, really good point. I hope that sinks in for everyone listening.
I mean, I'll never forget it. When I was a senior in the audit firm, and I was out on my first IPO ever. I won't never forget this. And the partner walked in, and he was a hard guy to deal with. But he walks in, and he immediately takes out the file and he writes a bunch of stuff on the back of a napkin. Basically, I mean, it was a piece of scratch paper essentially. Writes a bunch of stuff on it. He slides it across the table, and he's like, "When you deal with these 10 things, like I'll come back and I'll review the work papers." And I looked at him and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And like he literally he stepped back from a high level, and he could see, like, as soon as he looked through everything, he could see where there was issues. Like he just knew it. He slid it across the table and he's like, "I'm done with the audit as soon as you take care of these things." That in 5 minutes he identified from just stepping back and knowing the business, knowing where the risk was, and actually just back of the envelope saying, "Something's wrong here. Something doesn't smell right here. You got to explain this." And I was blown away, and I thought, wow, that is impressive. And that saves time too, right?
It saves so much time. Like, oh man, you remind me of a really bad story. I had gotten done booking all our deferred revenue journal entries, right? And I'm going line item by line item, booking everything in NetSuite. I'm like, I'm done. We can move on to the next thing. And the CFO's like, "Great, what's our deferred revenue balance?" And I was like, I couldn't tell you within 20 million bucks, and our materiality is like 5, right? I'm like, I can't tell you within 20 million bucks what our deferred revenue.
You understand that. You understand the details.
Yeah, but I know AIG Consulting booked $800 off this one transaction. It's just like not helpful at all. So yeah, picking your head up out of the weeds is really important. And another concept I think a lot of what a lot of us fall into, and I was like this too, is I would be like, my controller doesn't even know how to do my job. She doesn't even know what I do all day. Like what? But now that I've started my own company, that's fine. She should know enough to be dangerous and hire someone to do that. That's actually a good thing that she doesn't know how to do. Do you agree? Yeah. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. You got to hire the people around you that, that essentially are going to make you look good, right? Like, cause, and you got to let them do their job, right? Like micromanaging and everything else is, it can go sideways. Mentoring is very different from micromanaging in my mind, right? Like, and there's a fine line, right? There's a fine line where, you got to let people succeed and fail on their own a little bit, and then kind of reel them back in and cover for them when you need to, and get them to the point where they can be. But you're right. Like, I want people to take my job, right? Like I want my people that are working with me to take my job over, right? Like that's the goal. And quite frankly, like, I think you nailed it. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, yeah. Cause if you're really good, then they've done their job because they hired you.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that's kind of how it goes. Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. Yeah. No doubt.
So I'll admit the whole transition of like micromanaging and doing everything to letting go and mentoring has been challenging for me. I'll just admit that straight up. Any advice on how to make that transition? Any examples of how to like assign work under that mode? Just curious.
I mean, everybody has that transition, right? And like whether it's, for us, it's probably at a director level, in our firm, and in some cases, it's probably to senior manager level, maybe in an audit firm. But the reality is that rolling up your sleeves too is different from micromanaging. And like, you definitely have to let go once you train your staff and your seniors and everybody else underneath you and your team. Once your team is trained up, but you have to be clear with them as to what you want to see at the end of the day that's going to make your life easier as a executive, right? So like clearly laying out, like, here's what I want to see so that I can actually do that high level review of what you're doing so that I don't have to get into your business, is really, really important. Laying that out clearly, and then having them be able to be successful in delivering that to you, I think is super important. But it is a hard transition, right? I mean, I had a tough transition of letting go of things and always being involved in everything. But quite frankly, with I've got a book of 60 clients. I can't, at the point at which I was at my breaking point where I couldn't dig into the details on everything, I was like, okay, I got to let go. Right. And there's that point that everybody's going to have in their career or their lifetime that you're like, I got to let go and let people do their job.
You kind of get broken at some point, because I think the common thing is, well, I can do it faster, so let me just do it. But at 60 clients, you can't do everything faster. You gotta let go. That's Absolutely. If I could summarize a little differently. So you like to explain, here's what I need at the end of the day, and then let them figure out how to produce that for you, how to do it. But as long as you get what you need at the end of the day, you're happy with that?
Yeah. And most of the time it's me giving them examples of other work product that, that they can follow. Right. Cause I mean, there's, people kind of want a roadmap, right? That not all accountants are or super like think out of the box, right? So and in the business, and hopefully they get to that point at some point, but like being able to clearly explain and articulate, and and make sure that you transition stuff to them in an appropriate manner such that you can just take yourself out of the weeds, and then it just kind of just like the close process, right? Like if I don't explain to my team like what I want to see as a CFO, if I were a CFO on a weekly, daily, monthly basis, like I can't expect them to like produce something that I'm going to be happy with. Right. And if I give them an example or a roadmap in order to be successful in that area, and, teach them how to fish, I have to do that once. I don't have to do that every month. Right. Like I do that once. And then if I have a good team, I let them go. And then I get what I need in order to be more effective and more efficient and be able to focus on stuff that's important. Right.
Yeah. The higher level work. Awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this has been really, really informative, Gary. I want to thank you for taking the time, man. Really, really appreciate you hopping on to share any advice. Any parting words of wisdom you want to give the audience here?
You mentioned something I was thinking about earlier, was that, like if you're passionate about what you're doing, like it's going to show through, right? Like, so if you don't love what you're doing, like don't do it. Do something different, because your managers, your executives, whoever it is, it's going to be hard to move up when you're doing something that you quite frankly don't love to do. It shows through no matter how much you try to hide it. So I'd say go find something you love to do, go do it, and knock it out of the park. Plus, life is short. Absolutely. Life's short. And if you want to put that accounting degree to use, but want to try something else, FloQast is hiring across the organization. So just let us know. I love it. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Get my plug in there. Well, thanks again, Gary. I really appreciate you taking the time. And thanks for having me, Mike. Yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day.